I really wish I could go back in time and just tell myself where I would end up today. Because 15 years ago, I decided to try making my very first video game, and I had absolutely no idea where I would end up 15 years later. So I guess it all started when I was 13 years old. I was in the seventh grade. And I wasn't cool. Actually, I was the complete opposite of cool. I really had trouble making friends with the other kids at school. So I had a lot of free time after school. And one day I was just wondering, how are video games actually made? And could I make my own video game? So this was, I don't know, a few years after the internet really started to take off. I mean, I'm just old enough where I can remember when my family got internet for the very first time, which was just mind blowing at the time. I remember my favorite website to go to was Digimon.com or something like that. But anyways, that's besides the point. I just found out what Google was, so I used the Google search engine to try to find a video game engine. And I found one and I downloaded it, and it seemed really awesome at first. There was some presets to create like a character that could move around, and then there was the ability to just place tiles or like blocks that your character would be able to walk on. You could like set what the background image was going to be, and you could like make the background image move. So there's a bunch of things about this program I really couldn't figure out, and one of the things I couldn't figure out was how to animate a character. But I could figure out how to make the character like move around left and right and be able to jump. But this was all like default movement stuff. It's not like I actually created that. I was just using a template that was built into this game engine. And I really wish I could remember the name of the game engine, but it was so long ago I really can't. So I figured if I can't figure out how to make a character like walk, then I would need a character that could slide. So one idea I came up with was, how about you're just like a spaceship, maybe like an alien spaceship thing that kind of hovers just off the ground a little bit, and there's little flames coming out the bottom, and you could move around and slide around that way. But it seemed pretty weird once I actually made the spaceship. It started moving around, but because the collision detection was based on per pixel, the little flames, which I couldn't figure out how to animate, so they're completely static flames coming out of the spaceship. Each individual pixel would like collide with stuff. So it felt like the fire was completely solid, which was really, really weird. After messing around with this program just a little bit more, I kind of came to the conclusion that it just wasn't the right fit for me. I couldn't quite figure out how to create my own stuff. I didn't really know it at the time, but I guess I was really craving making a game, not just following a template and plugging in something that was already made, but like actually making it myself. So I went back to Google and I started looking around more, trying to find something to replace this game development program. And that is when I discovered GameMaker. And I downloaded GameMaker. Well, first I think I actually downloaded an article off of a website and actually printed it out and took it to school, and I was like reading this article while I was supposed to be doing homework. And at the end of the article, one of the suggested programs that it had was GameMaker. So I decided to download that when I got home, and that just changed to the next however many years. I mean, I used it all the way up to the end of high school, so I guess 5 years I think I used GameMaker just as a hobby in my spare time. But yeah, so GameMaker really, it was like the key. It changed everything, and I was really able to dive in and really create the game myself. So I had GameMaker downloaded, but I knew nothing. I had to figure everything out. And nowadays, things are a lot better to figure out how to make video games. But back then, there wasn't YouTube, so there weren't any tutorials or video tutorials on how to use GameMaker to make games. So I had to figure out everything by downloading the example projects, and luckily at the time, actually no, I probably wasn't smart enough. I think when I messed all the example projects up, I'd like go in, I'd take it apart, and I'd like tinker with it, and I'd like play around with the variables before I even knew what a variable was. And I'm pretty sure I saved over the example projects. So I had to re-download GameMaker to fix the example projects. But one of the example projects, you were like this like princess character that would run and jump around like a platformer. Basically, it was kind of like Mario, but it was just an example project to show you how you would make a character move in a platformer. So I really tried to dissect this example project and try to recreate it myself. I even went as far as to print off the user manual or parts of the user manual, because the user manual was so long, and actually I would take it to school and I would read that during class. And I mean, that's pretty crazy to think about. Like, can you imagine downloading the Unity user manual? I don't know. I mean, I guess there might be a user manual, and maybe there's some people who learn well that way. But yeah, I ended up reading that entire user manual cover to cover. Eventually, it took me a long time, and I felt like I had a little bit better of an understanding of how to use GameMaker, and I studied that example project a little bit more, and I decided to go for it, and I decided to recreate what I started in that other game engine, where I'd have a spaceship move left and right and be able to slide around. So one really cool thing about GameMaker at the time was that it had this pixel art editor built right in. So it's basically the equivalent of Microsoft Paint, except that you could take frames and make the character move frame by frame. So if you're creating a character that could walk, you'd have like one frame like this, one frame like this, one frame like this, and then you play it and it actually looks like your character is walking. So I took this idea and I decided to apply it to the spaceship to make the flames like wiggle and actually look like flames. And then another thing that I figured out, which was a terrible idea, but it seemed like a cool idea at the time, was that I found out that I could take the paint bucket tool and just click on different parts of the spaceship. So it was this really tiny little pixel art spaceship, which I think I also didn't realize that you could resize the size of the image at the time. So I think the default image size was like 16 by 16 pixels. So this was like a super low resolution game. So I got this really crappy pixel art spaceship drawn up, and I created a frame for each color, and then I kept using the paint bucket tool to change the different colors of the different parts of the spaceship. And then when you play it back, it'd be like zzz, and like really flash these neon colors. And I thought it looked cool at the time, but looking back, it was super ugly. So I never ended up saving this game. So unfortunately, I don't have any screenshots of what it looked like, but I'll do my best to kind of recreate what it sort of looked like. So I got the spaceship all drawn up and animated. And then I found out that when you're placing blocks around the world in GameMaker, you could also animate the blocks. So of course, I did the exact same thing as the spaceship, where I took the paint bucket tool for each frame and just filled in all the different parts with a different neon flashing color. And most of the blocks are basically just like a square with like an outline and a couple of lines. So they're all just like flashing like a strobe light. And it was, in reality, the ugliest looking video game I ever made. I got a spaceship, I got blocks, I figured out how to make a level, so I made a test level. I didn't really know what I was doing at the time, but I guess in the end, I actually was creating a test level, which is the way you're actually supposed to design games, is create kind of like a sandbox level and figure out how your player movement and all the other interactions are going to work, and then build it off into other levels from there. So I got that going. I placed some blocks around. I had a platform for the ship to move back and forth on. And step one was to make this make the spaceship actually move when I pressed the arrow key. And that part turned out okay, but there was a weird glitch where when I let go of the arrow key, it would keep on moving. So the way that GameMaker worked was it was actually visual scripting. So I was actually learning how to code. I didn't realize it at the time, but looking back, I was like, whoa, that's visual scripting. And a lot of those ideas and concepts I was able to take and use in the video games that I make today. But so I dragged and dropped these icons, and you had to put them in a certain order, and that was basically how you would put your video game together. So I tried looking at the example project of the princess platformer example project, and I saw the icons and the way that they had them all lined up. So I basically just tried to copy what they had, and to me it looked exactly the same, but that other game, it actually like worked properly, whereas my spaceship game, it just didn't work at all. I was first able to make it move to the right, and it would just keep on going. So I added a key to make it move to the left when you press the left arrow key, and it would switch and it'd start going to the left, but once again, it would just keep on going. So there was no way to stop, and that was super messed up, and I couldn't figure that out. So I decided to keep going, and I wanted to add a jump into the game. So I made it so when you press the space bar, I don't know if I actually figured out how to do proper gravity at the time, but I mean, I remember it sort of working, so I must have figured out some form of gravity. But where it stopped working was if you would slide and jump and hit a wall, you would just stick to the wall. And I spent hours and hours trying to figure out how to make that not happen anymore. And I remember looking back at that other example project, and I found the place where it said, like, if you're touching a wall but there's nothing underneath you, then move downwards until you do hit the ground. So I tried taking that logic and applying it to my own game, but I just could not get it. So I kept playing around with this concept, and I thought that maybe if I worked at it long enough, maybe I could make these glitches actually behave the way they're supposed to in a proper platforming game. But the glitches would just get worse and worse. Like once you stuck to the wall, you could actually jump again off of the wall. And it was just such a huge and glitchy mess. And I tried for hours and hours and days, and I just couldn't get this working properly. It was just permanently glitched out. So I was thinking about it, and I was just trying to figure out, like, how do I continue forward? And, I just would sit there pressing the arrow keys, trying it over and over again. Why isn't it working? And I decided, you know what? Let's pretend that these glitches are actually features. Let's pretend that that's a wall jump, and that's how I want wall jumps to work. Even though in other video games, when you do a wall jump, you want to like jump off of the wall. Like maybe you'll like slide down the wall slowly, like in Mega Man, and then jump off. But the way the game was working was obviously very glitchy. That's not the way wall jumps were supposed to work. But I decided, you know what? I'm gonna make it a wall jump. Even though, why would a little alien spaceship be able to wall jump off of walls? It was the weirdest concept, but I decided to roll with it. And I had one piece of code, well, I guess visual scripting. It wasn't actually code, but there was one function of the game left to do, and that was just make it so that once you touch a certain block, it would take you to the next level. So I think I just made it like a green square or something like that, and that was the finish line. And I figured out how to make it take you to the next level, and I was like, all right, there we go. That's everything that I need. I'm going to take this glitchy mess and just make it into a video game anyways. So I ended up spending lots and lots of time making levels, and I had to keep testing out each level. The first level, I think, was just like a staircase that you'd go down, you'd drop down a ledge, and then you'd like go backwards the other way. And then I would make them progressively harder and harder. I added spikes, which used the same code logic as touching the green square. They would take you to the next level. The only thing is that instead of taking you to the next level, the spikes would take you back to the beginning of the level. So code logic wise, it was the exact same thing. So I started building the levels harder and harder, and I think somewhere around level like 8 or 10 or something like that, it was getting so ridiculous. It was to the point where you had to like drop down into a pit of spikes, except right at the bottom of the pit of spikes, right before you die, there was this tiny little platform that you had to land on. And landing on it in any other video game would be one thing, But I also had that glitch where once you pressed the arrow key and you started moving, you would keep moving in that direction. So once you landed on this tiny little platform, you had to hit left, right to try to like make your character stay on the platform. And then you had to like jump off onto this other platform. It was just it was so ridiculous. So over the course of the next few days, I kept on working on it. I spent a lot of time. Each level, I had to go in and try each part of the level, and I had to adjust things like how high up the blocks were to make sure they weren't too high that you could jump on it. And basically, I just had to make sure that every level was beatable. And I kept going until I think it was like level 12 or something. And that was the final level. And I made that level as hard as possible. And I think I might have had like a congratulations, you beat the game screen or something like that. And then that basically marked the end of the game. It was finished and I was ready to play the game myself from the very beginning to the very end of the game, which was such an exciting moment. I totally remember just starting my own game from level 1 and like actually playing it as if it was a real video game. And it was just so satisfying knowing that I made this game. And it was really hard trying to beat it all in one go from level 1 to the very end. Because I remember on the last few levels, I'm pretty sure I cheated and jumped ahead in the level so that I could just test each individual part. But I wanted to test out the final game and actually go from the beginning to the end. And that was just like such an adventure. I remember the first time I beat my own video game, it was just like such an accomplished feeling. Like it was my game. Like this little world that I created was mine and I just beat it. That was it. That was all that I did with that game. Looking back, I wish that I saved those files so that I could go back and play it. I think I might have some of the GameMaker games that I made later on once I was in high school, or I don't remember how old I was, but I saved some of the games, but not all of them. I mean, there is a big handful of games that I can remember like up in my brain, but I wish that I could go back and play them. I had no idea at the time that I would, 15 years later, make video games for a living and virtual reality games of all games. Like it's so crazy that now you can put on a VR headset and actually go inside the video game. I remember as a kid dreaming about something like that, and we're living in the future now. We actually have that technology. So, man, I really wish I could go back in time and just tell myself where I'd be today. But I had no idea at the time. I just played my own game, I beat it, and I don't think I really even showed that game to anybody. I never uploaded it on the internet. I never thought, okay, now I'm going to try to make a career out of this. I never thought to make a backup of the game. I never like showed the other kids at school or try to make any friends through video games. I was still just like a pretty lonely kid with lots of free time after school. But now I had making video games as a hobby, and I spent hundreds and hundreds of hours just making my own video games, and the vast majority of them I never uploaded to the internet or tried to actually take to being a final product. I mean, there's a few games that like could have made like a nice web browser game or something like that that might have actually gained a bit of popularity despite being like super rough around the edges. But man, like I really wish I did something with those games, but I didn't. I just played it myself, and that was enough for me at the time. I mean, I guess looking back, maybe it was a really good thing because I was creating games for absolutely the right reason. And that was just because they were fun to make. It was fun to figure out how to make it. It was like making a video game is like playing a puzzle game or kind of like a Minecraft game, but combined into the same game, but like even better because there's not just like the possibilities of what you can create in that game, but there's infinite possibilities because you're the developer of that game. And then in the end, to just have your own little world that I can say like, this is mine, I created this. It was just such an awesome feeling, and I was addicted to that feeling. And yeah, I just created games just for the joy of it. So if you're watching this video and you're thinking you want to try making games yourself, I absolutely encourage you to do that. It was the best decision of my life. I mean, even if you don't become a game developer as a career, you're going to learn so many amazing skills that are going to branch off into other things. Not to mention, it's just like the most fun and rewarding hobby to learn, like ever. It's just such a cool, amazing thing. And not to mention the fact that technology has just gone through the roof since I was a kid. And now there's YouTube and thousands of video tutorials online. And there's lots of different game engines to choose from for free, both 2D game engines and 3D game engines. If you got yourself a VR headset, you can go inside of your games. Like, it's just such an incredible thing to spend your time doing. So if you're thinking about making video games, definitely do it. Just jump into it, go for it. You're not going to regret it. It's going to be really hard at first, and your game doesn't have to be perfect. But as long as you have fun making it and it's your own little world that you can be proud of, then that's the most awesome thing in the world. Oh, and learn from my mistake. Save your game, because 15 years later, you're going to want to go back and look at it and see how far you've come. So yeah, learn from my mistake. Save your game. And also, if you're feeling comfortable with it, totally upload your game and let other people play it. I had no idea at the time how satisfying it is to have somebody else play your game. I mean, maybe it was an okay thing that I went years and years with nobody else playing my games, because I would just create them for myself. But it would have been really great to get feedback from other people. So nowadays you can upload your game to a website like itch.io or GameJolt, or you can join Game Jam like the Ludum Game Dare, and then lots of people will give you feedback on your game. Well, that is the story of the very first video game I ever made, and I'm really glad I made that awful, terrible, glitchy video game, because it led to me being able to make virtual reality games today, which is so awesome. So if you have any ideas or suggestions or questions that you want to ask me for me to answer in the next video, please let me know in the comments below. So until my next video, I will see you later, and keep making games.